Rootkits are much more sophisticated and much harder to detect and get rid of than some of the other things we've been talking about. Let's just take a look. A rootkit replaces core parts of the operating system. For that reason, because they are running down in ring 0 in the privileged part, they will not be logged. They are hard to detect because the operating system cannot report on the fact that something that deep is infecting it. So they're hard to detect, they're hard to eliminate. Usually the objective of a rootkit is to give us an advanced persistent threat, APT, backdoor access. Something that we want to be there for quite some time, quietly, slowly, either exfiltrating data, meaning stealing it, or doing something in the background, or acting as either a bot, a zombie, or in a botnet, or command and control over a part of the zombie army. Rootkits can occur at a number of levels. They can attack the hypervisor, so they can exploit weaknesses in hardware functionality, like the Intel virtualization technology or the AMD virtualization hardware features in the BIOS and the motherboard. They could be hardware or firmware related. They could hide in the hard drive, in a network card, in the BIOS. They could be in the kernel, in ring 0. They could substitute portions of kernel code. They could be in the bootloader. They could replace or modify the legitimate bootloader. The bootloader is the thing that boots up the operating system. It's basically startup files. They could be at the application level, replacing standard binaries or parts of code of an application. They could be at the library level, so they work higher up in the OS. They replace original system calls with fake backdoor versions. What that means is a library, and in Microsoft we call it a dynamic link library, or DLL. That's a partial block of code that just does one thing or just does something straightforward. And any application, like maybe I need you to draw a window. Well, maybe this one DLL just draws a window. And all these apps, including the operating system, need to draw a window. So they call the DLL. They temporarily use its functionality and they run the code, and thank you very much. Well, when we have library-based DLL, library-based rootkits, when the operating system says, or the app says, draw a window for me, that gets intercepted, and what they get back is, oh yeah, a window plus something else. So that is library level. Loads of rootkit tools: Horsepill, Grayfish, Sirefef, Wingbird, Avatar, Azazel, Zero Access, Illyrion, loads and loads of rootkit tools. This is just a few that EC Council lists. How do you detect them? There's a couple ways. First, we already know what the hash of the key files are, and we check to see if it's changed. So we know from encryption, cryptography, and we talk about that in a later module, that hashing, and we know this from passwords, you take something that's unencrypted, or it could be encrypted also, but you take something that starts a certain way. It's a block of code, it's a piece of data, it's a file, it's a network transmission, it's a packet, it's a something. And it has a certain structure to it, whatever that structure is. We can run a hashing algorithm against it and come up with a signature that says, this is this. Now, the thing about a hashing algorithm is you change the tiniest thing here, and that completely changes your hashing algorithm output. So you could hash the critical files up front and then periodically check, because if anyone has sneaked something into something, the hash will turn out to be really different. And then that's an obvious red flag. However, you will have had to have hashed up front before anything. There are tools now. Microsoft operating systems, they do hash. They actually use driver signatures. They do hash, they sign, and when we talk about cryptography, we'll talk about hashing in a signature. But they basically hash at least the key drivers and the key components ahead of time. However, if we can get low level enough, like before the operating system boots, then that throws that out the window. There are also software tools, SigVerif, Tripwire, MD5Sum, SHASum, a bunch of them that'll do hashing as well. So one thing could be just run a hash while it's still uninfected, and then periodically run that same hash to see if anything has changed. Or compare every executable file and every system process to a database that exists that has known rootkit signatures. Probably this is a cloud-based service, although you could have a local service which you are constantly updating as well. You could also use something called heuristic or behavior-based. Look for any deviations in normal activity. You could have runtime execution path profiling. So when something runs, we call it runtime, when it's time for a program to run, because a program will basically load and then run. So when it runs is the run time. And it's going to use things that are in expected pathways and do things a certain way. Well, we can see if any of that is deviant from normal or from what's expected. So compare the runtime execution paths of all the system processes and executables before and after infection. But that means we have to know. We have to have a database with known activity. Or we can compare things. We can do what's called cross-view based. Compare all the key elements, the system files, the processes, the kernel, the registry keys, to a database that contains the known good state. So these are all possibilities. So one thing you can do manually, which you don't want to do, you want to use a tool that'll do this for you. Check the file system. You could run a directory command, dir, which is a DOS command. We can basically run a dir command that checks all subdirectories for archive and hidden, and then archive not hidden, or don't hide, unhide rather, and compare these things to that of a clean system. Or use a tool like WinDiff, Tripwire, SigVerif to check hashes. You could also examine the registry. No, you don't want to do this manually, but behind the scenes, this is what would happen. Export the registry. HKey local machine software and HKey local machine system. Export that and compare that to a known clean system. Now, I don't think that's really practical because that assumes that you have not changed your operating system in any way, shape, or form, including including installing things or like changing IP addresses. So you have to be careful about that. But hey, that in theory is correct. There are tools to detect rootkits: Stinger, Avast, Kaspersky's TDSS Killer, Malwarebytes, Rootkit Buster, UnhackMe, Sophos Virus Removal Tool, F-Secure, Sanity Checker, and GMER, Gamer, I guess. Here's an example of the Kaspersky one. And ran a scan, found some rootkits. They are high risk, and they are here. And here's the MD5Sum. Look at this. This is some funky, now when you see .sys, .sys, that's a driver. Who knows what this is? I mean, no one would pay attention to that, right? Here's another one, too. Now, you might say, whoa, are we really trusting Kaspersky? Well, that is a subject for debate because we know where Kaspersky comes from. And there have been some discussions that things from hostile foreign countries, maybe you don't trust them. Even if they are regular commercial things, they are just mechanisms for that hostile foreign country's government. So who knows? But anyway, that is beyond the scope of this class to discuss whether or not we trust anything that comes from Russia or China. That you can be reading up on the security bulletins to see what you think about it. How do we defend against rootkits? Well, the first thing is sometimes they will mess you up so much, just be prepared to reinstall the OS and all the apps, which means you'd better have a clean, trusted source from the get-go on non-writable media. You can periodically do kernel memory dumps, which I don't think you want to do, but you might have tools that'll do it. You can install rootkit scanners. Now that one you would want to do. You would want to do that. You could harden the system against an attack, and especially install a host IDS and a host IPS. Keep that system patched and monitored. So that's what we need to know about rootkits.